Guys, it's Sunday and of course we're free today, and the first thing we're going to do is it's very early for the flea market, so we're actually here before they open up. So that means that we can take some pictures of people who are not expecting it because they are building up, and it's a little bit less crowded, and maybe we can also find some good deals. So enjoy today's episode of Behind the Closed Doors, and we're going to go to the flea market, and we're going to go to a very cool place close to our home, which is world famous, but I'm going to show you that in a moment. Okay, now one of the things when you think about the Netherlands, what is the first thing that you think? Well, okay, Frank maybe, but cheese, wooden shoes, windmills, right? Yeah, that's very stereotypical. The other thing that we're very famous for is our waterworks. And one of the most famous things is of course the Delta Works. And believe it or not, but there was a time of course where there were no computers. So everything they had to do was built on scale. Now very close to our home is actually the place where they built the Delta Works in a very small but still rather big scale. Now normally this building is absolutely closed. I have to be honest, a few years ago I did in a similar building some urbex shoots, but this building is absolutely off limits, except for today. So join us in Behind the Closed Doors, where actually this time the doors will open for the place where the Delta Works were born. And of course our local newscaster is here. And as you can see, the water was really pushed up here to see what happens. These are older shots, of course. Okay, so this is one of the wave basins actually used for the Delta Works. And the cool thing about this is you can change the depth to 30 centimeters or 90. And they were testing different stuff here, including a cable system to get the basalt blocks in. And the nice thing is they needed an alternative for the cable system. And this is where the Americans came in with the helicopters. There was a competition between the Dutch with the cables and the Americans, and in the end the Americans won. So that's nice for you guys watching from the US. So this is actually where they created all the waves, and they can create different kind of waves. And the cool thing is that the waves can also go any direction, so this is a great scale. Okay, here you can see the gears, and they use this to change the different waves. Now the waves are of course constant. The other you saw was for one big wave. This is constant waves, so you can really test everything here, how it behaves. But now you might wonder, why did they do it in a forest? Well, that's very simple. If you work on scale, the trees actually make sure that you don't have any problems with the wind. So let's say if you do it in the open, a little breeze would actually be a storm. So if it would be a little bit more wild, that wouldn't work for the scale models. Now why in my area? Well, as you know, we live on the bottom of the sea. And no, I'm not SpongeBob SquarePants. And because we live on the bottom of the sea, the material in the floor, or sorry, in the ground is actually great because it doesn't have any involvement with the water. So you don't need to put any asphaltus or concrete here. So that's a really cool thing. Now because this whole area was actually brought back from the sea, in other words, again we live on the bottom of the sea, it was all actually divided into areas of 800 meters by 300 meters. And between those areas you actually had these little areas here with water. And those were very important because again we're under sea level, so that water has to go somewhere. And this is actually also what you could say, why don't you use this kind of water for all the stuff with the scale models? Well, that's not possible. Because in this water there's actually, as you can see here, all kinds of plants and different kinds of material floating around. And the machinery is very much accurate that it will actually see all that little things. So they had to find something else. And that's actually when they started using groundwater. And at the end of this road there's actually a small factory where they took the phosphor out of the water, the sulfur, out of the water to make sure that the water was totally clear. Because again, on a scale model, if something goes wrong, you really see a big difference. So it has to be very, very accurate. And this is the engine room. You just saw the engine room. Now, why was the engine room used? Because this ditch that you're gonna see now is huge. It's really big. And they needed to create big waves here to see how all the concrete blocks would actually behave if it was hit by a storm. So they used that to power this little baby. So this goes all the way up there, where they tested the concrete and other stuff. And this is actually the part that created the waves. As you can see, this is huge, incredible, right? And imagine this is on scale. So they could literally test everything here. Unique. Okay, now believe it or not, this whole facility is pretty high tech and it was used till last year. And actually the one company that built the thing in the end is actually an American company, and they built the same one for Delft. This is just a very, very small part of everything you can find in the forest over here. And we actually call it waterloopbos. Let me translate it in English. Watercourse forest. And there are a lot of models here. They actually had way more room than in the old system before. So that's why they built here, for example, Oosterscheldekering, on the Maasvlakte. And you guys probably don't recognize any of those words if you're not Dutch, but those are really, really important waterworks. And Enwick also enjoyed it.
They also did some other things, like the harbor in Lebanon and some other countries. They're really famous, and everybody could ask questions or ask for proeven, for testing.
Yeah, so they also did some stuff in consignment of other companies.
Yeah, because it was a foundation?
Foundation, yes.
It was not a company. It was really something else.
Yeah. So whenever you're in the neighborhood of my hometown, Emmeloord, make sure you check out this area, because part of it is still open for nature monuments, and it's a really interesting walk. Okay, we're back home, and let's look at some of the images I took. Now, this was shot on the flea market. Well, seems obvious, right? This one too, I just love the colors here. Really cool and popping. A lower angle shot. I liked all the gear that the guy had. And, well, he was sitting there, so I thought, like, why not? And this guy, I just loved the way he was playing with the dog, and, well, it's a character. So I really liked that. And this was shot during the open day for monuments for the Delta works. So I think this was a cool shot, but I wanted to show a little bit more, and I didn't bring my wide angle lens. So what I actually did is I stitched 5 images together to create this one. And that's the cool thing about Lightroom. You just shoot 5 images, and it doesn't matter if you shoot them next to each other or on top of each other. Lightroom can create a great panoramic shot. Now, of course, during these kind of days, I always still look for people for my portrait project. So I also found 2 interesting characters here. This is actually the camera operator for our local television station, Omroep Flevoland. And he's focusing on something that's very important, of course. And this guy I just couldn't resist. This is the black and white and the color. I like the black and white a little bit more. And from another angle. I love to do the high angles down or lower angles up. Gives you a totally different look on somebody. Okay, so those were the images for today. And thank you so very much for watching this episode. And we'll see you next time.